My name is Elena Thorne, and I am 29 years old. This past weekend, my parents forced me to cook and clean for my sister Victoria's anniversary party. 80 guests, 4 days of nonstop labor. I prepped complex European menus and specialized dietary dishes until my hands were raw and my back felt like it was breaking. By Saturday afternoon, I was a ghost of myself, standing in a kitchen full of steam and grease, wearing a stained apron and exhausted to my core. When I finally reached my breaking point and asked my mother for just 10 minutes of help with the plating, she didn't just refuse. She laughed. In a room full of prestigious guests, she raised her glass and said, "Elena, you're the only one here without a real job. You have all the flexibility in the world, so stop being dramatic and get back to the oven." What my mother didn't know was that 30 minutes prior, I had digitally signed a branding contract worth $350,000, more than Victoria makes in 2 years. And what none of them realized was that Marcus Sterling, the CEO of the global tech giant Aether Group, was standing 5 feet behind her, hearing every single word of her humiliation. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. This is how one weekend changed everything. It started 2 weeks before Victoria's party with a text from my mother at midnight on a Tuesday. "Victoria is closing a massive merger, so you'll handle her anniversary event. 80 guests. I'll send the menu." It wasn't a request, it was an order. I was sitting in my dark apartment, illuminated by 3 monitors, finalizing the brand architecture for Aether Group. I had been working 18-hour days for weeks, surviving on caffeine and the kind of focused intensity that happens when you know you are creating something world-changing. I typed back, "Mom, I'm in the middle of a major project. Can we talk about a caterer?" Her response came before I could even set my phone down. "Honey, you work from home. You have flexibility. Victoria is a senior investment banker with a real schedule and partner reviews coming up. This is what family does." There it was. That word, flexibility. It was her code for, your work doesn't matter as much as your sister's. This wasn't a new dynamic. At Victoria's law school graduation years ago, I had designed and printed 300 programs, stayed up all night making centerpieces, and arrived at the ceremony only to hear my father tell a colleague, "Victoria organized all of this herself. Such a capable girl." When I quietly mentioned I had helped, Mom had patted my hand and said, "Well, you had the time to help, didn't you?" I looked at the Aether Group email in my inbox. Subject, Final Executive Review. I had 4 days to perfect a presentation that could redefine my entire career. But I texted back, "Okay, send the details because that is what I always did." I played the role of the flexible daughter to keep the peace. The grocery list arrived at 1 a.m. It was 6 pages long. Victoria wanted everything elegant and artisanal, including ingredients that required me to visit 4 different specialty stores across the city. Thursday morning, I was on a high-stakes Zoom call with Aether's executive team. The CEO, Marcus Sterling, appeared on screen. He was sharp, intimidating, and possessed the kind of presence that made the room go silent. He studied my work with genuine intensity. "Miss Thorne," he said, "this brand narrative is exceptional. You've captured exactly what we've been trying to articulate for years." My heart soared. Then he added, "I'll be in your city this weekend for a personal obligation. I'd like to meet in person Saturday to discuss the final contract." I felt a pit in my stomach. "I'd love that, Mr. Sterling, but I have a family commitment all day Saturday." He smiled warmly. "Family comes first. I respect that. Actually, I'm visiting an old university friend, Robert Thorne. Any relation?" The room seemed to tilt. "That's my father," I managed to say. "Small world," Marcus replied. "Perhaps I'll see you there." By Saturday morning at 6 a.m., I was in my parents' kitchen. I was marinating meats, prepping vegetables, and setting up the service stations. Victoria came down at 10 a.m. in a silk robe, her hair in rollers. She didn't say good morning. She just frowned at the menu. "I forgot to tell you, 3 of my most important guests are now strictly vegan and keto. Can you improvise something?" I looked at the 3-layer lasagna I had spent 4 hours assembling. "Victoria, I bought ingredients based on your list." She sighed, looking at me like I was being difficult. "You're the creative one, Elena. Just figure it out. Mrs. Harrison is coming and she's the head of the promotion committee. This party has to be flawless. By 2 p.m., the house was filling with people wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. I moved through them like a ghost, refilling champagne glasses and collecting dirty plates. In the bathroom, the only place I could lock the door, I checked my phone. I had a voicemail from Marcus Sterling's assistant. Miss Thorne, Mr. Sterling has approved the final terms. $350,000 project fee plus a $220,000 annual retainer for the chief creative officer role. He's eager to sign on Monday. The word contract echoed in my head as I washed my hands and returned to a kitchen overflowing with dishes. I felt invisible. I was the daughter who had time, whose work could always wait because nobody in this house believed it was work. I was arranging appetizers when a woman approached me. "These are beautiful. Did Victoria hire a caterer?" she asked. "I made everything," I replied. Her eyebrows rose. "Are you a chef?" I shook my head. "I'm a brand identity designer. I'm Victoria's sister." Just then, my mother appeared with a bright, performative smile. "I see you've met Elena. She does little freelance projects from home. Very creative. She's always been our little artist." The woman's interest immediately cooled. "Oh, how nice. Working from home must be so convenient." Mom steered her away, already changing the subject to Victoria's impending partnership. I stood there holding a tray of food, once again reduced to a hobbyist. Then a man's voice spoke behind me. "Those look excellent." I turned to see Marcus Sterling. He was holding a drink, looking at me with searching kind eyes. "You made all of this yourself?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "Impressive. You work in design, if I remember correctly?" Before I could answer, my mother's voice rang out sharply from across the room. "Elena, we need more wine in the lounge. Stop chatting and move." I looked at Marcus, my face burning with shame. He watched as I was summoned like a servant. Through the doorway, I could see my father greeting Marcus with genuine pleasure. "Marcus! God, it's been 30 years. They fell into easy conversation. Old friends, successful men, equals. Meanwhile, I was in the kitchen, covered in food stains, and listening to my sister laugh about how Elena is so lucky she doesn't have a real job to stress her out. I looked at the dirty dishes and the timer for the main course. I thought I could keep doing this forever, waiting for them to finally see me. Or I could finally see myself. The kitchen door swung open so hard it hit the wall. "Elena!" Victoria shouted, her voice panicked. "Where is the main course? Mrs. Harrison needs to leave in 30 minutes. I looked at the timer. "It needs 15 more minutes, Victoria. It has to rest." She stepped toward me, her face contorted with stress. "I don't care about meat science. These are important people. Why do you always make things so difficult?" Something inside me went very still. "I'm not making it difficult. I'm following the instructions you gave me while working a 12-hour shift for free." Victoria laughed, a sharp, mean sound. "Shift? Elena, you work from your couch in pajamas. I'm in boardrooms defending actual clients with actual stakes." I looked at my sister, beautiful in her designer dress, and then I looked at the email on my phone. The $350,000 contract was sitting there, waiting. My little art project was about to change the face of a billion-dollar company. But to my family, I was just the girl who had nothing better to do than roast chicken for their friends. Part of me wanted to keep helping, to keep being the good daughter. But that part was dying. I realized then that capabilities should never be confused with obligations. If they didn't respect my work, they didn't deserve my labor. Part one was over, and the era of the flexible Elena Thorne was ending with it. It all truly began 2 weeks before that disastrous Saturday. I was sitting in my apartment, the air thick with the smell of cold coffee and the hum of 3 high-definition monitors. It was nearly 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was in the middle of a focused intensity that only designers understand. I was deep into the core branding architecture for Aether Group, a project that had consumed 18 hours of my day, every day, for the last 3 weeks. This was the most significant presentation of my career, the kind of opportunity that happens once in a lifetime. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. It didn't start with a greeting or an inquiry about my health. It was a directive. "Victoria is closing a massive $1 million merger at the bank, so you will be looing after her entire anniversary party. 80 guests. I will send you the menu and the shopping list shortly. Do not ask questions, just get it done. I stared at the screen, my eyes burning from the blue light. I typed back a quick response, trying to be reasonable. Mom, I am in the final stretch of the Aether project. It is the biggest thing I have ever worked on. I cannot spend 4 days cooking and cleaning. Can we please hire a catering service this time? The reply came before I could even set the phone down. Honey, you work from home. You have flexibility. Victoria is in high-stakes meetings all week and has her senior partner review coming up. This is what family does for one another. There it was. That word, flexibility. To my mother, flexibility was code for your work is not real. In her mind, because I didn't put on a suit and commute to a glass office building in the city, my time was essentially an infinite resource that could be harvested for Victoria's benefit. This was a pattern that had defined my life for 29 years. I remembered Victoria's law school graduation. I had spent 72 hours straight designing and printing 300 custom programs, hand-making centerpieces that looked like they belonged in a magazine, and coordinating the entire reception. At the ceremony, I watched my father beam with pride as he told a colleague, Victoria organized this whole celebration herself. She is such a capable young woman. When I quietly mentioned to my mother that I had actually done all the labor, she just patted my hand and whispered, "Well, you had the time to help, did you not?" I looked back at my monitors. I had 4 days left to perfect a visual strategy that could redefine a billion-dollar tech giant. But I knew the argument was useless. I texted back, "Fine, send the details." The grocery list arrived at 2 a.m. It was 6 pages long. Victoria didn't just want a party. She wanted a culinary showcase. She wanted organic, farm-to-table ingredients, specialized European cheeses that could only be found at a boutique shop across town, and a full dessert spread made from scratch. She wanted everything to look elegant yet approachable, a phrase she had definitely stolen from a luxury lifestyle blog. By Wednesday morning, while I should have been finalizing the color palette and typography for Aether, I was driving to 3 different specialty grocery stores. I was lugging crates of produce and heavy bags of flour into my parents' kitchen, my mind racing with brand guidelines and logo iterations. Every time my phone rang with a work off, I had to balance it on my shoulder while chopping vegetables or marinating meat. Thursday morning brought the most important meeting of my life. It was a Zoom call with the full executive board of Aether Group. I was presenting my final concept. In the background, downstairs in my parents' house, ingredients for 80 people were piled high in the refrigerator like a ticking time bomb. Then, Marcus Sterling appeared on the screen. He was the CEO, a man known for being incredibly sharp and impossible to impress. He watched my presentation in total silence. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he could hear it through the microphone. When I finished, he leaned forward and studied the brand narrative on his screen. "Miss Thorne," he said, his voice deep and measured, "this is exceptional. You have captured a vision that we have been trying to articulate for years. This is not just a design, it is a transformation." I felt a rush of relief so strong I almost cried. Then he added, "I will be in your city this weekend for a personal commitment. I would like to meet in person this Saturday afternoon to finalize the contract details and discuss your future with Aether." My stomach dropped. "I would be honored, Mr. Sterling, but I have a major family obligation all day Saturday. It is my sister's anniversary party." Marcus smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Family comes first. I respect that. As it happens, I am visiting an old friend of mine this weekend, Robert Thorne. Any relation? The room seemed to tilt. "That is my father," I managed to say. "Small world," Marcus replied. "Perhaps I will see you there then. We can talk in the margins of the event." I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I felt a cold dread. I knew how my family treated me. I knew what Marcus was about to see. Saturday morning arrived like a fever dream. I had been in the kitchen since 5 a.m. I was preparing the main courses, setting up the coffee service, and polishing silverware. Victoria came downstairs at 10 a.m. in a silk robe, smelling of expensive perfume. She didn't look at the work I had done. She just frowned at the counter. "Elena, I forgot to mention, 3 of my guests are now strictly keto and vegan. You need to improvise a new course for them. and the cleaning lady canceled, so you will need to scrub the guest bathrooms before people arrive at 2 p.m. I looked at her, my hands covered in flour, my hair a mess. Victoria, I have been working for 5 hours. I still have to finish the main roast. I do not have time to scrub floors and invent new menus. Don't be difficult, she said, pouring herself a cup of the coffee I had just brewed. You have the flexibility to manage it. These are important people, Elena. My promotion is on the line. Just power through. By 1:30 p.m., I was back in the kitchen, frantically assembling a last-minute keto-friendly salad while the main course simmered on the stove. I heard laughter from upstairs as my mother and Victoria did their makeup. I was wearing the same clothes I had slept in, an apron splattered with tomato sauce and grease. I hadn't even had time to shower. The doorbell rang at 2 p.m. precisely. 80 guests began to fill the house. They were dressed in designer labels, discussing high-level law and finance. I moved through them like a ghost, refilling champagne glasses and picking up discarded napkins. I was invisible to them, just a part of the service staff. In the kitchen, I checked my phone. A new voicemail from Marcus Sterling's assistant. Miss Thorne, Mr. Sterling has signed off on the $350,000 contract. He is also prepared to offer you the Chief Creative Officer position with a $220,000 base salary. He is looking forward to seeing you this afternoon. I looked at the mountain of dirty dishes in the sink. I looked at my reflection in the toaster, pale, exhausted, and covered in food stains. I was the most successful person in that house, and yet I was being summoned to the living room by my mother's sharp voice. Elena, we need more ice in the lounge. Hurry up! Stop being so slow. I realized then that this was the moment. The contrast between who I was to the world and who I was to my family had become a chasm. I grabbed the ice bucket, my heart turning to stone. I was done being flexible. I was done being the invisible daughter. The explosion was coming, and I was the one who was going to light the fuse. If you have ever felt like the invisible person in your own family, please hit the like button so I know I am not alone. Comment the word worth below if you believe your time is just as valuable as anyone else's. Subscribe to see what happened when I finally stepped out of that kitchen and faced the truth. Thursday morning was the pinnacle of my professional life, yet I was physically standing in a space that constantly tried to diminish me. I was hunched over my laptop in my parents' guest room, surrounded by 3 monitors that felt like a high-tech fortress against the domestic chaos downstairs. I was on a Zoom call with the full executive board of Aether Group, presenting the final brand architecture. On the screen, Marcus Sterling, a man with the kind of presence that makes everyone sit up straighter, was studying my work with genuine intensity. When I finished, he didn't just nod. He leaned in and said, Miss Thorne, this brand narrative is exceptional. You've captured exactly what we've been trying to articulate for years. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then he threw the curveball. I'm going to be in your city this weekend for a personal obligation. I'd like to meet in person to finalize the contract details. I hesitated, thinking of the 80 guests and the mountain of groceries in the fridge. I'd love that, Mr. Sterling, but I have a major family commitment on Saturday. He smiled warmly and replied, Family comes first. I respect that. Actually, I'll be seeing an old university friend this Saturday, Robert Thorne. Any relation? The room seemed to tilt. That's my father, I managed to say. Small world, Marcus replied. Perhaps I'll see you there. Subscribe to the channel right now. Let me tell you about the moment everything started to unravel. The transition from a high-stakes corporate presentation to being the family maid was instantaneous and jarring. The moment the Zoom call ended, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Did you get the organic eggs? The regular ones make the soufflé taste cheap. I hadn't even known she wanted soufflé. Nobody had asked. It was just an expectation added to the pile. Saturday morning, I was in my parents' kitchen by 6 a.m. while the rest of the house slept. I was prepping vegetables, marinating meats, and setting up the coffee service as if I were a hired caterer. Victoria came downstairs at 10 a.m. in silk pajamas, her hair in rollers, smelling of expensive perfume. She didn't offer to help. She just poured herself a cup of the coffee I had made and frowned at the menu list. Actually, I forgot to tell you, 3 of my guests are strictly keto and vegan. Can you improvise something? I looked at the 3-layer lasagna I had spent half the night assembling. Victoria, I bought all the ingredients based on the list you sent me. She sighed, looking at me like I was being intentionally difficult. You're the creative one, Elena. Just figure it out. Mrs. Harrison is coming, and she's deciding on partner promotions next month. Before I could even respond, my mother appeared in the doorway, fully dressed and glowing. Elena, you're not dressed yet? Guests start arriving at 2 p.m. I wiped my hands on my apron, feeling the weight of the morning. I'm cooking, Mom. I'll change before they get here. She grabbed her purse and waved a dismissive hand. Well, don't take too long. You know how you get distracted by those little computer projects. Oh, and the bathrooms need cleaning. The cleaning lady canceled. She was gone before I could point out that I had been working since dawn. By noon, I was running to the store for keto ingredients, still wearing the clothes I'd slept in. By 1:45 p.m., I was back in the kitchen, elbow deep in raw chicken, while I heard laughter from upstairs as Victoria and Mom did their makeup to the sound of upbeat music. When the doorbell rang at 2 p.m., I was a mess. Hair in a bun, apron splattered with tomato sauce and grease. 80 guests were about to enter, and I hadn't even showered. As the party filled with people I didn't know, lawyers, bankers, and executives in clothes that cost more than my monthly rent, I became a ghost. I moved through the rooms, refilling drinks and collecting empty plates, retreating to the kitchen every few minutes to stir pots and check timers. In the bathroom, the only place I could lock a door, I checked my phone. I had a voicemail from Marcus Sterling's assistant. Miss Thorne, Mr. Sterling has approved the final contract. $350,000 for the rebranding project, with an offer for a permanent chief creative officer role. The word contract echoed in my mind as I washed my hands and returned to a kitchen full of dirty dishes. It was the same feeling I had at our joint college graduation, where I was the one taking photos of Victoria with our parents while my own degree was treated like a secondary achievement. My father had always believed law and finance were the only real careers. To him, my $3,000 logo designs were just a phase I'd grow out of, even though they required more intensive work than Victoria's unpaid internships. I was arranging appetizers when a woman in her 60s approached the kitchen. These are beautiful. Did Victoria hire a professional chef? I looked up and said, No, I made everything. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Are you a chef? I shook my head. I'm actually a brand identity designer. I'm Victoria's sister. Just then, my mother appeared with a performative smile. Elena, I see you've met Sarah. Elena does little freelance projects from home. She's very creative, always has been. I watched the woman's interest cool instantly into polite dismissal. Mom steered her away, already bragging about Victoria's partnership track. Then I heard a voice behind me. Those look excellent. I turned to see Marcus Sterling. He looked at me, his eyes searching and kind. You made all of this yourself? He asked. Yes, I replied, my face burning with the sauce stains on my apron. Impressive. You work in design, if I remember correctly? Before I could answer, my mother's voice rang out from the living room, sharp and commanding. Elena, we need more wine in the lounge. Stop chatting and move. I escaped to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I opened another bottle. Through the doorway, I could see my father greeting Marcus with genuine pleasure. Marcus! God, it's been 30 years! They fell into an easy conversation as equals, while I was being summoned like a servant. Victoria then burst into the kitchen, her face tight with panic. Elena, where's the main course? Mrs. Harrison is asking about dinner. I checked the timer. 15 more minutes, Victoria. The meat needs to rest. She stepped toward me, her voice rising. I don't care about meat science. Why do you always make things so difficult? I stood my ground, the $350,000 contract burning a hole in my pocket. I'm not making things difficult. I'm following the instructions for a party I didn't even want to host. Victoria laughed, a sharp, mean sound. Host? Elena, you're just helping out because you have the time. I'm in courtrooms defending actual clients with actual stakes. I looked at my sister and realized she didn't see a professional. She saw a convenience. She saw someone whose flexibility meant she had no value of her own. As Marcus Sterling watched from the hallway, I realized that capabilities should never be confused with obligations. The moment of unraveling wasn't just about the dinner. It was about the realization that if I didn't respect myself, they never would. If you've ever been the one doing all the work while someone else took all the credit, please comment the word worth below. Let's support each other in knowing our value. Stay tuned for the final part of this story to see what happened when I finally took off the apron and walked out. Saturday morning did not feel like a celebration. It felt like an endurance test that I was already losing. While the rest of the world was still tucked under their covers, I was standing in my parents' kitchen at 5 a.m. sharp. The cold tiles bit into my feet as I began the grueling process of prepping for 80 people. The list my mother had sent was not just a menu. It was a manifesto of high-maintenance demands. I spent hours julienning vegetables with surgical precision, marinating expensive cuts of meat, and whisking delicate sauces until my forearms burned with fatigue. I was operating on 3 hours of sleep, my mind still racing from the Aether Group project, yet here I was, playing the role of a line cook for a sister who had never even toasted her own bread. At 10 a.m., the door to the kitchen swung open. Victoria stepped in, looking like she had just stepped off the pages of a luxury loungewear catalog. She was wrapped in heavy cream silk pajamas, her hair perfectly set in rollers, and her skin glowing from a full night's rest. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask if I needed a hand. She simply poured herself a cup of the premium coffee I had just brewed and frowned at the counter. "Elena," she said, her voice dripping with casual entitlement, "I forgot to mention something crucial. One of the senior partners, Mrs. Harrison, is bringing a guest who is strictly vegan and keto. I need you to completely overhaul the starter and the main course for that table. Oh, and make sure the dessert is sugar-free as well." I stopped my knife mid-chop, staring at the mountains of artisanal cheese and cream-based sauces I had spent all morning preparing. "Victoria, I bought these ingredients based on the list you gave me 2 days ago. I've already prepped the lasagna and the soufflés. I don't have the ingredients for a high-end vegan keto menu for 80 people." She sighed, looking at me with that familiar expression of patronizing disappointment. "You're the creative one, Elena. Just improvise. Mrs. Harrison is the head of the promotion committee. If she's not impressed, my partnership track is at risk. You have the flexibility to handle a little change, don't you? It's not like you have a courtroom schedule to keep." Before I could even find the words to protest, my mother floated into the room, already dressed in a vibrant designer suit. She didn't look at the sweat on my brow or the exhaustion in my eyes. She only looked at her watch. "Elena, why aren't the guest bathrooms ready? I just found out the cleaning lady had an emergency and won't be coming. There are 5 bathrooms that need a deep clean before 2 p.m. Make sure you use the lemon-scented polish for the marble." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Mom, I have to finish the prime rib. I have to redo the menu for Victoria's partner. I can't cook for 80 people and clean 5 bathrooms at the same time." My mother grabbed her purse, already heading toward the stairs. "Don't be dramatic, dear. You've always been so good at multitasking. Besides, you work from home. You're used to managing your own time. Just power through. We're going to help Victoria get ready. Don't take too long. You know how you get distracted by your little computer projects." She was gone before the kitchen door could even settle. I stood there, surrounded by raw ingredients and the heavy silence of their indifference. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk out right then. But the flexible daughter in me, the one who had been trained for 29 years to be the family's safety net, simply picked up the cleaning bucket. By noon, I was a ghost in my own home. I was running to the grocery store in the same clothes I had slept in, frantically searching for keto-friendly flour and organic avocados. I was scrubbing toilets and polishing mirrors, my heart pounding with the stress of the ticking clock. At 1:30 p.m., I was back in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I assembled a last-minute caprese salad, while the main course simmered on the stove. I could hear the sounds of laughter and upbeat music from upstairs. My sister and mother were doing their makeup, sharing stories and excitement, while I was elbow-deep in raw chicken and cleaning chemicals. At exactly 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. The house was suddenly flooded with 80 of the city's most elite professionals. I could hear the clinking of fine jewelry and the hum of conversations about mergers, litigations, and multi-million-dollar deals. And there I was. I was standing in the center of a kitchen that looked like a war zone. My hair was pulled into a messy, grease-slick bun. My face was flushed from the heat of the ovens. My apron, once white, was now a map of tomato sauce stains and water spots. I was the invisible engine of the party. I moved through the crowd like a shadow, refilling champagne flutes for people who didn't even look me in the eye. I was the one collecting discarded napkins and dirty plates, retreating to the kitchen every few minutes to check the timers. I felt a stinging sense of irony. Just 48 hours ago, I was the visionary designer who had commanded the respect of an entire executive board. Now, I was being summoned by my mother's sharp voice from the lounge. "Elena, we're low on ice. Stop daydreaming and bring some out immediately." In the middle of the chaos, I retreated to the guest bathroom, the only place I could lock a door. My phone was buzzing. I had a new voicemail from Marcus Sterling's assistant. Her voice was crisp and professional. "Miss Thorne, Marcus is very much looking forward to seeing you this afternoon at your father's home. He's authorized me to tell you that the $350,000 contract is ready for your signature. We see you as a vital pillar of the Aether Group's future." I leaned against the cold marble counter, looking at my reflection. I looked like a servant. I felt like a servant. But the email on my screen told a different story. I was the chief creative officer of a global giant. I was a woman who had just secured a deal that would dwarf my sister's entire annual salary. The contrast was so sharp it felt like a physical blow. I walked back out into the hallway, ice bucket in hand, and that's when I saw him. Marcus Sterling was standing by the large bay window, deep in conversation with my father. He looked every bit the powerful CEO, polished, intelligent, and formidable. He turned his head and our eyes met. He didn't see a maid. He didn't see an artist with a hobby. He saw the woman who had redefined his company's brand. But then his eyes dropped to my stained apron and my trembling hands. The shame I felt in that moment was eclipsed only by the cold realization that my family would never see me this way. To them, my value was measured only by how much of their burden I could carry. As Marcus watched from the hallway, I heard Victoria's voice pierce through the air from the dining room. "Elena, this salad is 2 minutes late. Do you want to ruin my entire career?" I looked at Marcus, then at the kitchen door, and finally at the apron tied around my waist. The fuse had been lit. I was done being flexible. I was done being the invisible daughter. If you've ever reached a point where you realized your kindness was being treated as a weakness, hit the like button right now. Comment the word respect if you believe that no matter what your job is, you deserve to be treated with dignity. Subscribe to see what happened when I finally took off the apron and showed them exactly who I was. I moved through the crowd like a silent ghost, a shadow in the corner of my own family's celebration. My hands, still slightly trembling from the adrenaline of the day, balanced a heavy silver tray of appetizers. To the 80 guests in the room, I wasn't Elena Thorne, the visionary brand architect. I was simply the help. I was the interchangeable figure refilling their champagne, the nameless person clearing away their discarded napkins, a useful tool only for what I could provide in that moment. The air in the living room was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the hum of high-level conversations about mergers and court cases. I felt invisible, a feeling that wasn't new, but was reaching a painful crescendo. It reminded me of my college graduation day, where I had spent the entire afternoon taking photos of Victoria with our parents, even though we had both walked across that stage on the same day. Victoria's degree was in pre-law, while mine was in design. My father had said then, with a casual tone that cut deeper than any insult, that we had simply reached different levels of achievement. In a rare moment of silence back in the kitchen, away from the prying eyes of the elite, I finally looked at my phone. A new email notification from Sarah Smith, the executive assistant to Marcus Sterling, glowed on the screen. My breath hitched as I read the words. The $350,000 contract with Aether Group had been officially approved. But that wasn't all. They were offering me the position of Chief Creative Officer, with a guaranteed base salary of $220,000 per year. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. This single contract was worth more than Victoria made in 2 years at her prestigious bank. It was sitting in my inbox while I stood in a kitchen full of dirty dishes, wearing a sauce-stained apron, listening to my family explain why my career wasn't real. I realized then that if I stayed quiet, if I kept being the helpful and flexible daughter, I would be trapped here forever, the one whose work could always wait because nobody actually believed it was work. I straightened my back and walked back into the lounge to serve the next round of bruschetta. A kind-faced woman in her 60s, a colleague of Victoria's named Sarah Bennett, stopped me. "Dear, these look beautiful," she said, her eyes warm. "Did Victoria hire a professional caterer for this?" I looked her in the eye and replied, "No, I made everything myself." Her eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "You did all of this? Are you a professional chef?" I shook my head slowly. "Actually, I'm a brand identity designer. I'm Victoria's sister." For a brief second, I felt like a human being again. Sarah Bennett smiled and began to ask about my work: brand strategy, visual identity, corporate rebranding. But before I could even finish my first sentence, my mother appeared. She was all bright, performative smiles, her hand landing heavily on my shoulder as if to steer me away. "Sarah, I see you've met Elena," she said, her voice dripping with that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound supportive but was actually being dismissive. "Elena does little freelance projects from home. She's very creative, always has been." I watched Sarah Bennett's expression shift instantly. The genuine interest cooled into polite dismissal. "Oh, how nice," she said. "Working from home must be so convenient." My mother didn't even notice the sting in her words. She was already steering Sarah away toward Victoria. "Elena is still in her little freelance stage, you know. She just does these small projects on her computer. She doesn't have a structured career path or a real job with benefits and a retirement plan like Victoria does." I stood there holding the tray, invisible again. Every word was a slap. My little freelance project was currently the backbone of a major corporate rebranding for Aether Group, a Fortune 500 company. I looked toward the window and saw Marcus Sterling. He was standing near my father, his expression unreadable, but he was watching me. He was watching me stand there in my stained apron, listening to my mother casually dismiss everything I had built with my own hands. The kitchen door swung open behind me, and Victoria's voice cut through the air, sharp and panicked. "Elena, where is the main course? Mrs. Harrison is asking about dinner." I followed her into the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind us. I checked the timer. 15 more minutes, Victoria. The meat needs to rest or it will be ruined." Victoria's face went white. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the stress in her eyes. "I don't care about meat science, Elena. I need you to bring it out now. Mrs. Patterson is leaving in 40 minutes for the theater, and my entire partnership review depends on this night being flawless." I turned from the stove, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've been working for 12 hours straight to make this flawless for you. I'm following the timing we agreed on." Victoria laughed then, a sharp, mean sound that echoed off the kitchen tiles. "Oh, please. You work from your couch in pajamas. I'm in boardrooms defending actual clients with actual stakes. My career is on the line tonight, and you're acting like your little design hobby is more important than my promotion." Something inside me went very still. The capabilities I had were being confused with obligations, just as Marcus had warned me earlier. Victoria saw me as a convenience, not a professional. She saw my flexibility as a lack of value. I looked at her, beautiful in her designer dress, and thought about the email on my phone. "Do you even know what project I'm working on right now?" I asked quietly. Victoria didn't even look at me. She was busy checking her reflection in the microwave door. "I don't have time for your stories, Elena. Is it another logo for a few $1,000s?" "It's a $350,000 contract with Aether Group," I said. Victoria froze. She turned back to me slowly, her mouth opening and closing. "What? 350,000? Aether? The tech giant?" "Yes," I replied. "I've been negotiating it for 3 weeks. I'm signing on Monday. I'm also being hired as their chief creative officer." The silence in the kitchen was absolute, broken only by the muffled laughter of the guests in the other room. Victoria stared at me, really looking at me for the first time in years. She was recalculating everything: my flexibility, my little projects, and the person standing in front of her. But even as the shock registered, her eyes flicked back to the kitchen door. That's that's bigger than most of my cases, she whispered. Then her voice returned to its demanding edge. But you're still going to serve the dinner, right? Mrs. Patterson is still out there, and I need this. Even after learning the truth, her first instinct was to ask me to keep being her servant. I looked at the perfectly cooked prime rib and then at my sister. The part of me that always helped, that always made itself smaller so she could shine, was finally completely exhausted. If you've ever reached the point where you realize that even your greatest achievements wouldn't change how certain people treated you, hit the like button right now. Comment the word value if you've learned to stop seeking approval from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Subscribe to the channel immediately. Let me tell you about the quant. Everything finally exploded. The kitchen door didn't just open. It hit the wall with a violence that made the copper pans rattling on the rack. I was hunched over the carving board, my hands shaking as I checked the internal temperature of the prime rib. The heat from the industrial ovens was stifling, and the air was thick with the scent of roasted rosemary and the sharp tang of stress. Victoria stood in the doorway, her silhouette sharp against the warm light of the hallway. She looked like a queen in her designer silk dress, but her face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated panic. She didn't look at the meat. She didn't look at the 5 other side dishes I had perfectly timed. She looked at her watch. "Elena, what is wrong with you?" she hissed, her voice vibrating with a high-pitched desperation. "The main course is 10 minutes late. Mrs. Harrison is already looking at her phone. She has theater tickets, and if this meal isn't served in the next 5 minutes, my entire performance review is going to be a disaster." I didn't look up immediately. I focused on the knife. "The meat needs 15 minutes to rest, Victoria. If I pull it now, the juices will run, and it will be raw in the middle. It will be ruined." She let out a sharp, jagged laugh, the kind of sound that meant she wasn't just angry. She was looking to hurt me. She stepped into my workspace, her expensive heels clicking on the tile I had spent 3 hours scrubbing earlier that morning. "I don't care about meat science, Elena. You always do this. You always overthink everything. Always move too slow because you don't understand what real pressure feels like," she sneered. She leaned over the counter, her eyes narrowed in a cold, mocking gaze. "I am out there defending actual clients with actual stakes. I'm protecting my reputation in front of some of the most powerful directors in the country. Meanwhile, you just sit at home in your pajamas, designing a few little logos for pennies. Do you honestly think your creative process is more important than my career?" The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, I could hear the muffled laughter of 80 guests, the clinking of wine glasses, and the voice of my father bragging about Victoria's latest merger. I looked down at my apron, splattered with grease, tomato sauce, and the sweat of 12 hours of unpaid labor. I thought about the word flexibility. I thought about the little freelance projects my mother had laughed about an hour ago. I set the carving knife down with a slow, deliberate click. I turned to face my sister, and for the first time in 29 years, I didn't feel like the helpful little sister. I felt like a stranger to her. "Do you even know what project I'm finishing right now, Victoria?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She rolled her eyes, already turning back toward the door. "I don't have time for a hobby update, Elena. Is it another $3,000 branding for a coffee shop? Just bring the meat out." "It's not a hobby update," I said, stopping her in her tracks. "It's a $350,000 contract with Aether Group for a full corporate rebranding and brand architecture." Victoria froze. The air in the kitchen seemed to vanish. She turned back slowly, her hand still on the door handle, her face losing every bit of its color. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking a language she didn't recognize. "What?" she whispered. $350,000? Aether Group? You mean? The tech giant?" "Yes," I replied, leaning against the counter. "I've been negotiating the terms for 3 weeks. The contract is sitting in my inbox right now, ready for my signature on Monday morning. And they're not just hiring me for a logo, they're bringing me on as their chief creative officer. Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at the kitchen stool and practically collapsed onto it, her silk dress wrinkling as she sat. She was processing the numbers, recalculating the value of the sister she had spent years dismissing. But then, a second wave of shock hit her. Aether Group, she repeated, her voice trembling. Elena, that is the firm my bank has been trying to secure as a client for over a year. My senior partner, Mrs. Harrison, has been obsessed with getting their merger business. They are the biggest fish in the region. I know, I said. And while you were out there telling everyone I didn't have a real job with benefits or a structured path, I was the one their CEO was calling to redefine their entire global identity. I watched as the reality of the situation sank in. The pajama-wearing artist was currently holding the key to the very client her entire firm was desperate to impress. The power dynamic in the room shifted so violently it was almost physical. Victoria looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in her life. She saw the talent, the grit, and the sheer market value she had ignored because it didn't fit her narrow definition of success. But then, the most incredible thing happened. Even with her world turning upside down, the entitlement didn't disappear. It just transformed. She looked at the prime rib, then back at me, her eyes pleading. I didn't know it was that big, Elena. I truly didn't, she said, her voice small. Then she gestured helplessly toward the dining room. But you're still going to serve it, right? Mrs. Harrison is still waiting. If you tell them about the Aether contract while you're serving, it might actually help me. It would show how successful our family is. I looked at the meat, perfectly rested now. I looked at the 80 people out there who didn't know my name. And then I looked at my sister, who still wanted to use my success to polish her own image, even after she had just insulted the very foundation of my life. Capabilities shouldn't be confused with obligations, Victoria, I said, quoting the words Marcus Sterling had told me just an hour before. I made the food. It's ready. But the era of me being your invisible maid is over. I picked up the platter and walked out into the dining room. I didn't smile. I didn't perform happiness. I set the food down to the sound of applause. But as my father reached out to pat my shoulder and brag to the table about how helpful I was, I caught the eye of Marcus Sterling at the end of the table. He gave me a knowing, supportive nod. I walked back to the kitchen, took off my apron, and laid it on the counter. I was done. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. If you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who should have seen it all along, comment the word vision below. Let's support each other in setting boundaries. Stay tuned to find out what happened when the CEO finally spoke up in front of the whole party. The air in the kitchen was thick, not just with the steam from the ovens, but with a tension that had been building for 29 years. I stood there looking at my sister Victoria, perfectly polished, radiant in her designer silk, and utterly convinced that my existence was merely a convenience for her success. She had just laughed at my career, calling it a hobby in pajamas, even after I told her about the $350,000 contract from Aether Group. To her, I wasn't a professional. I was just the flexible sister who was currently 10 minutes late with the prime rib. Something inside me didn't just snap. It went cold and clear. I realized that as long as I held this carving knife and wore this stained apron, I was agreeing to their version of me. I was validating their belief that my time was worth less than theirs. I looked at the platter of perfectly rested meat, the roasted root vegetables, and the artisanal sauces I had spent 12 hours preparing while simultaneously managing a global branding project. It was beautiful work, but it was the last work I would ever do for free in this house. I reached behind my back and untied the strings of my apron. I pulled it over my head in one slow, deliberate motion. I felt the weight of it drop from my shoulders, and with it, the weight of 1,000 favors and sacrifices I had made to keep the peace. I didn't say a word to Victoria, who was still checking her reflection in the stainless steel fridge. I walked past her, out of the kitchen, and straight into the center of the grand living room. The room was a sea of expensive suits and cocktail dresses, 80 of the most influential people in the city were mid-conversation, sipping wine I had poured and eating appetizers I had plated. My father was near the fireplace, his hand on the shoulder of a senior partner, bragging about Victoria's merger genius. My mother was across the room, laughing with a group of women about my art phase. I didn't wait for a lull in the conversation. I walked right into the middle of the floor. My hair was a mess, my shirt was damp with steam, and I stood in stark contrast to the opulence around me. But I had never felt more powerful. The room went quiet, person by person, as they noticed the disheveled daughter of the house standing in their midst without her serving tray. I looked directly at my parents and then at Victoria, who had followed me out, her face pale with confusion. "I have a brief announcement for my family," I said, my voice steady and reaching every corner of the room. "For years, I have been told that because I work from home, my time is flexible. I have been told that my career is a little project and that my role in this family is to be the invisible support for those with real jobs. This weekend, I was expected to cook, clean, and serve 80 people alone, while being mocked for the very career that allows me to be here." I saw my mother's face flush a deep, angry red. My father stepped forward, his voice a low warning. "Elena, not now. We have guests. Let's talk about this privately." "I've tried talking privately for a decade, Dad," I replied, not backing down. "But since you've made my career a public joke, I'll make my boundary a public fact. I am not a servant, and my work is not flexibility for everyone to exploit." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Victoria hissed my name, her eyes darting to her colleagues, but I wasn't finished. "The food is ready in the kitchen," I told the room at large. "The prime rib is rested and the sides are hot, but I am done serving it. You are all adults, and I'm sure you can manage to plate your own dinner. I am declining to continue working for free while being disrespected in my own home." I turned to my mother. "You said if I couldn't handle the pressure of a party, I shouldn't be in the room. Well, I've decided I don't want to be in this room at all." "Elena Thorne?" my mother cried, her performative grace finally cracking. "You are being childish and dramatic. You are ruining your sister's night over a few dishes. If you walk out that door right now, do not expect to come back." I looked at her, and for the first time, her threats had no power. "Okay," I said simply. The silence that followed that "okay" was absolute. It was the sound of a dynamic shattering. I walked to the coffee table, folded my stained apron neatly, and set it down. I looked over at the window where Marcus Sterling was standing. He didn't look shocked like the others. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, a look of pure professional respect. He knew that someone who couldn't set boundaries in her personal life could never protect the integrity of a multi-million-dollar brand. I headed for the front door. Victoria ran after me, grabbing my arm in the foyer. "Elena, stop! Mrs. Harrison is watching. Do you have any idea what this looks like? You're destroying everything I've worked for." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "No, Victoria, I'm finally protecting everything I've worked for. Happy anniversary." I stepped out onto the porch, and the cool evening air hit my face like a benediction. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for them to realize that I was the one who had kept their perfect world running. I got into my car, my hands still shaking but my heart light. Before I even started the engine, I pulled out my phone and sent one email to Sarah Smith, Marcus Sterling's assistant. "Monday, 9 a.m., confirmed." I look forward to signing the contract and beginning my role as Chief Creative Officer. I drove away, leaving the lights of that house behind me. I had lost a dinner party, but I had gained myself. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't the flexible daughter. I was Elena Thorne, and I was exactly where I belonged. If you've ever reached the point where you had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect, hit the like button right now. Comment the word freedom below if you've ever had to walk away from people who refuse to see your value. This was the moment everything changed for me. And if you stay tuned for the final part, you'll see exactly how the truth came out when the CEO finally spoke to my father. The aftermath of my departure began before I even reached the end of the driveway. As I drove away from the house that had been my prison for 29 years, I could see the glow of the party lights in my rearview mirror, but the silence inside my car was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. My phone began to vibrate incessantly on the passenger seat. First, it was Victoria. "Elena, come back right now. People are asking for dessert. You are making this so awkward." Then, a message from my mother. "This is beyond childish. You are embarrassing the entire family in front of Marcus Sterling. We will discuss your behavior later." Finally, a short text from my father. "Kiddo, I know you are upset, but please come back and help finish this. We can talk afterward." I didn't answer any of them. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb and kept driving. I didn't need to be there to know that the house of cards was falling. However, I didn't have to wonder for long what happened next. The following morning, my Aunt Susan, the only person who had ever truly seen the unfairness in our family, called me with a play-by-play account that felt like a script from a movie. According to Susan, the moment the front door slammed behind me, a heavy, uncomfortable cloud settled over the living room. My mother tried to put on a brave face, telling the 80 guests that I had simply caught a sudden migraine and had to go lie down. But people weren't blind. They had heard the argument in the foyer. They had seen me standing there in my sauce-stained apron, declaring my independence. The atmosphere turned from celebratory to cold within minutes. Victoria, desperate to salvage her perfect night, tried to take over the dessert service herself. She had never spent more than 5 minutes at a time in that kitchen. In her silk dress and high heels, she tried to carry a massive tray of berry parfaits I had prepared. Halfway to the dining room, she tripped. The tray went flying, and cream and berries splattered across the expensive rug and the shoes of 3 senior partners. One of her junior colleagues had to help her clean it up, which, according to Susan, made Victoria look incompetent and disorganized rather than capable. My father tried to make coffee, but in his flustered state, he forgot to put in a filter. He served 80 people cups of lukewarm water filled with gritty coffee grounds. By 8:30 p.m., the guests were making excuses about early mornings and babysitters, fleeing the house to escape the palpable tension. But the real reckoning happened after the guests left. Only the family, a few stragglers, and Marcus Sterling remained. Marcus had stayed until the very end, watching the chaos with a serious, unreadable expression. As my father walked him to the door, Robert tried to apologize again. "Chris, I am so sorry about Elena's behavior tonight. She has been under a lot of stress lately." Marcus Sterling stopped in his tracks. He didn't just look at my father, he looked through him. "Bob, I'm not here to talk about her behavior," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the now empty hallway. "I'm here to talk about her career. I've been negotiating with Elena for the past month. She is the most talented brand architect I've seen in a decade." My mother and Victoria froze. "What kind of career?" my mother asked, her voice small. "I just offered her a $350,000 contract for our global rebranding." Marcus replied, his professional coldness cutting through my parents' confusion. "And we are currently finalizing her position as Chief Creative Officer with a $220,000 annual salary." The silence that followed was absolute. Susan said you could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. My mother actually swayed as if she might faint, and my father had to steady her. They couldn't comprehend it. To them, I was the daughter who made little logos from the couch. To the rest of the world, I was a high-level executive they couldn't even afford to hire. "We had no idea," my father managed to stammer. "Elena never mentioned she was working at that level." Marcus looked at him with a look of pure, professional disappointment. "That's because you never asked, Bob. You didn't ask because you had already decided her work was beneath you. I heard you tell a guest she was just in an art phase. Capabilities should never be confused with obligations. You treated a global tier professional like household staff in front of your peers. To be honest, I am deeply disappointed to see a talent like hers treated with such lack of respect in her own home. But the damage didn't stop there. Mrs. Harrison, the head of Victoria's promotion committee, had been putting on her coat by the door when Marcus started speaking. She stopped and turned back, her eyes fixed on Victoria. "You didn't know your own sister had secured a 6-figure contract with Aether Group?" she asked. Victoria tried to recover, her voice high and desperate. "She's very private. She doesn't share much." "Or perhaps you didn't listen because you were too busy demanding she scrub your floors," Mrs. Harrison retorted. She looked at Victoria with a new kind of scrutiny. Leadership isn't just about closing mergers, Victoria. It's about empathy, judgment, and how you treat those you perceive as having less power than you. What I witnessed tonight was a total failure of character. The fallout was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, the story was already circulating among the elite circles of the city. One of the guests had even posted a vague but pointed message on social media about a family who treated their brilliant daughter like a maid while she managed a massive corporate deal. The post was shared hundreds of times. Victoria was called into a private meeting with Mrs. Harrison at 8 a.m. sharp. Her partnership review, the goal she had sacrificed my sanity for, was officially postponed for 9 months. The firm told her she needed to demonstrate growth in areas beyond legal skill, specifically focusing on emotional intelligence and leadership ethics. She had lost 9 months of her career because she couldn't give me 9 minutes of respect. My parents and Victoria were devastated, but it was the first time they were forced to see the truth. They hadn't just lost a caterer that night. They had lost the respect of their peers and the daughter they had spent years taking for granted. If you have ever seen someone's true colors when they thought you had nothing to offer them, hit the like button right now. Comment the word justice if you believe that character matters more than a job title. This was the moment they realized their mistake. But as you'll see in the next part, an apology doesn't always mean a return to the way things were. Stay tuned to hear about the letter that arrived at my new office. Standing in my new office on Monday morning, looking out over the city skyline from the 25th floor, the silence was almost overwhelming. It was a sharp, beautiful contrast to the chaotic, steam-filled kitchen I had occupied just weeks ago. There were no timers beeping, no demands for decaf coffee, and no one calling me flexible as a way to hide the fact that they were taking advantage of me. On my desk sat the finalized Aether Group contract, the $350,000 branding agreement that had started this entire revolution in my life. Next to it was my official offer letter for the Chief Creative Officer position, guaranteeing a $220,000 annual salary. These were no longer just numbers on a screen. They were the physical proof that I had finally stopped waiting for my family to see my value and had started seeing it myself. Looking back at that night, I realize now that my family didn't treat me that way because they were monsters. They treated me that way because I had allowed them to build a framework where my time was free and my career was a hobby. For 29 years, I had been the good daughter, the one who accommodated every whim and smoothed over every conflict. I had confused being capable with being obligated. As Marcus Sterling so brilliantly put it that night, just because you are good at something doesn't mean you owe it to people who don't respect you. I hope this story will allow you to appreciate yourself and the immense value you bring to the world, even if the people closest to you are still looking at you through an old, narrow lens. The transformation in my family has been slow and often painful. Setting boundaries isn't a magic wand that fixes people. It is a shield that protects your peace. My mother still sometimes calls and starts a sentence with, "Since you're working from home today, could you just..." And then she catches herself. She remembers the 2 months of silence. She remembers the public embarrassment at the party when the CEO of Aether Group had to explain to her that her daughter was a global tier professional. She remembers the rule: respect my career as an absolute professionalism, or I leave the conversation. Victoria's journey has been the hardest to watch. Seeing her promotion delayed by 9 months was a bitter pill for her to swallow. She had spent her entire life believing that her path was the only one that mattered. And to have a senior partner tell her that her lack of empathy was a leadership failure shook her to her core. But even that was necessary. It forced her to stop performing for her colleagues and start looking at her character. Last week, she sent me a text that wasn't about a merger or a party. She just asked, "How is your project going? I'd love to actually hear about what you do." It was a small step, but it was a real one. This story is a reminder. Never let anyone, even family, lower your value just because they do not understand the path you are traveling. Success is not just about the size of your contract or the title on your door. True success is the ability to stand in a room full of people who want you to be small and choose to be your full, authentic self instead. I spent too many years carving meat for people who wouldn't even ask me about my day. I spent too many years believing that flexibility was a virtue when it was actually a trap, designed to keep me available for everyone else's needs but my own. If you are currently fighting to protect your personal boundaries, please know that it is not selfish to prioritize your dignity. It is survival. When you stop being the flexible person, people will call you difficult. They will call you dramatic. They will tell you that you are ruining the family dynamic. But what they are actually saying is that they are uncomfortable now that they have to do their own work. Let them be uncomfortable. Your worth is not up for negotiation. I hope this story will allow you to appreciate yourself. Please comment, "I see my worth," if you are determined to respect yourself in the way I have learned to. And if you want to hear more stories about setting boundaries and finding your voice, check the description for my next video. See you there. This journey has taught me that the most important contract I ever signed wasn't the one with Aether Group. It was the silent agreement I made with myself on that Saturday night, the agreement to never again accept less than I deserve. My life is different now. My relationships are fewer, but they are honest. My work is demanding, but it is respected. And most importantly, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see an invisible maid. I see a woman who knows exactly who she is. If you are also struggling to defend your personal boundaries, please comment boundaries below so that we can support each other in this journey. We are a community of people who are learning that we don't have to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. Hit the like button and subscribe if you commit to always valuing your own worth, no matter what labels others try to put on you. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. It wasn't easy to share the details of my family's implosion, but if my story helps even one person walk out of a kitchen where they aren't being valued, then every moment of that stress was worth it. Remember, your career is real, your time is precious, and your voice deserves to be heard. Don't wait for them to see you. See yourself first. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll dive into another story of someone who had to lose their place in the family to finally find their place in the world. Until then, stay strong and keep building your own empire. You have the power to change the narrative. I am living proof of that. Good luck on your own path to freedom and respect.